Over at DC Comics, the publisher is headed in a bit of a different direction over with the Flash franchise with the milestone Flash issue 800. This tale sees the current creative team of Jeremy Adams and Fernando Pasarin wrap up their acclaimed fan-celebrated run. And if that wasn't exciting enough, the upcoming creative team of Si Spurrier and Mike Deodato are debuting their new story for The Flash in this special issue 800 as well. We're also seeing some creators returning to the Flash franchise who have had some previous runs over with the characters, like Geoff Johns, Mark Waid, and Joshua Williamson. My name is Araco Braddock, and let's go ahead and celebrate all things in the Flash franchise with The Flash issue 800. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content. And I want to go ahead and kick things off by reading our solicitation text to give you context behind The Flash's issue 800. An oversized anniversary issue concludes writer Jeremy Adams' acclaimed tenure, with special guests Mark Waid, Joshua Williamson, and Geoff Johns joining the celebration. As the Adams run races to the finish line, get a prelude to the new Dawn of DC chapter of the Fastest Man Alive's adventures from the dream team of Si Spurrier and Mike Deodato. I want to go ahead and share the creative team behind The Flash 800. We're going to go ahead and start here with the first creative team on the first story. This one is called Don't Come to Central City. It's written by Jeremy Adams, featuring pencils from Fernando Pasarin, inks by Oclair Alberts, colors from Matt Herms, and letters from Rob Leigh. And I want to go ahead and show off the gorgeous cover for The Flash 800 coming in directly over from Taryn Clark. Here's a look at this epic cover that I think kind of celebrates so many aspects of the Flash franchise, Jeremy Adams' run, DC Comics rebirth, and so many kind of epic moments in the life of Wally West. I want to extend a big thank you over to Adventures in Poor Taste and talk a little bit about this first story in the collection. So in terms of Don't Come to Central City, I thought this was a great and irreverent way for author Jeremy Adams to kind of, sail into the sunset in terms of his Flash run. I really enjoyed the way that some of the rogues of the kind of Flash gallery here are just having an irreverent conversation. I think Fernando Pasarin has always been great at depicting some of the humor from Jeremy Adams, and I think some of these like super candid facial expressions that we're looking at over for some of these villains are just so funny and interesting to go ahead and look at. I always like it when the Flash leans into a sense of humor, but the thing that I really appreciate about some of Jeremy Adams' scripts for this series especially is how there's always kind of a touch of drama and insight into the issue. Even though it's a more irreverent story, I really think that the working relationship between Pasarin and Adams is just phenomenal here, and watching some of their sequences kind of end this issue was absolutely wonderful. I loved how this story had a look at some of the extended Flash family that Adams has featured so prominently across his run over at DC, and really found that the kind of final emotional plot beat with one of the characters in here was actually quite emotional. Also, I just love the way that Fernando Pasarin is able to capture Wally's face in some of these panels, and I think the last page is exactly how I wanted this run to end, despite the fact that the context here is much different than I anticipated for Adams to kind of go ahead and end his run over on The Flash. But I really enjoyed this tale and was happy to see the final moments of Jeremy Adams' current DC Flash run are infused with, so much comedy, humor, a look over at the Flash family, and just a touch of drama illustrated so precise and cleanly over for Fernando Pasarin. I'm really going to miss this run, but I'm glad that the creative team went out with such an incredible story. I want to go ahead and talk about this second story over in the collection. This one is called The Max in the Mirror. It's written by Mark Waid, featuring pencils and inks by Todd Nauck, colors from Matt Herms, and letters by Rob Leigh. I also enjoyed this story featuring Impulse quite a bit. I think the relationship between Impulse and Max Mercury is super, super interesting. Would love DC to kind of flesh this out like more extensively. They kind of been doing it in some of the previous issues of the Jeremy Adams run. But I definitely think this is one of the kind of most interesting relationships over in terms of the comic book space. Really found it interesting how Max and the Flash are sort of advising Impulse on how to fix the situation. Impulse kind of has his own ideas and goes off sort of like in his own direction. And sort of watching the Flash, sort of view Impulse in a different context, despite the fact that he's a much younger character, was a great plot hook. I think Mark Waid is really, really good at writing the subtlety and patience over for Max Mercury as a character, as well as the kind of impulsive drive, for lack of a better word, over for the character of Impulse. I love some of the final moments here and how, even though this was a story really kind of fleshing out the characterization of some of these individual characters, it felt like there was a little bit of an arc in that each of the individuals in the story, be it Flash, Max Mercury, and Impulse, developed in their own direction here. I want to go ahead and talk about the next story over in our collection. This one is called Flash Family. It's written by Joshua Williamson, featuring pencils and inks from Carmine di Giandomenico, colors by Ivan Plascencia, and letters by Rob Leigh. So I thought that this story over from Williamson and Giandomenico was just excellent. It was so refreshing kind of getting a look over at this book when it was kind of a little bit closer over to the status quo of DC Rebirth. I think that Giandomenico's Flash line is just so interesting, and the way that he kind of draws like all these expressions on the characters and always features characters with so much emotion is really quite wonderful here. The Flash book also used to have more of an emphasis on Barry Allen. So honestly, I was glad to see that Williamson and Giandomenico went ahead and went off in the direction over with Barry to make it feel a little bit more like their Flash run over on the title for just a few moments. I loved all these kind of individual references and the fact that Barry and Iris were able to go ahead and get just a little bit of a fraction of a second of time alone. And also the way that this issue or the way that this story brings in the rest of the Flash family was also a really great and excellent moment for me to go ahead and check out here. Honestly, it was just great seeing Giandomenico's work over on the Flash again. Would love to see him come back over in the Si Spurrier run for an issue or two. And I want to go ahead and talk about the next story in our collection. This one was called Blitz Back. It's written over from Geoff Johns, featuring pencils and inks from Scott Kolins, colors from Luis Guerrero, and letters over from Rob Leigh. So I have to say, in terms of this story, it's really focused on the kind of rogues of the DC universe, particularly in fleshing out Hunter Zolomon as a character. I usually do not like these stories where we learn about the villains and we get more details and context behind their backstory. Oftentimes, I find that these stories fall into so many cliches and they're unable to tell a story that's sort of interesting in its own right. But Geoff Johns and Scott Kolins really kind of push the limit of what I perceive to be an interesting villain story here. There are so many fascinating little like nuances and connections to other villains here, like Eobard Thawne over in this story. And frankly, I think Scott Kolins' art is not something I usually prefer over in this tale as well, but I can't deny the level of energy that Kolins has in his work. And I think it just accentuates and makes Geoff Johns' script look even more interesting here. So at the end of the day, I didn't expect to like this story as much as I did, but just the way that Kolins and Johns work together and flesh out, this character over in the DC universe is just absolutely enthralling. I'm definitely going to go ahead and have to go back and check out Geoff Johns' run over on the issue. This story is just absolutely lovely and adds some characterization to a villain who frankly needs some additional context here. Let's go ahead and talk about this last story over in the collection. This one is called Between Love and You. It's a Dawn of DC prelude, written over from Si Spurrier, featuring pencils and inks from Mike Deodato Jr., colors from Trish Mulvihill, and letters by Hassan, Otsmane-Elhaou. I was so excited for this story, and to see what Si Spurrier would lend over to the Flash franchise. I expected something really bold and irreverent, because a lot of Si Spurrier's X-Men work has just been absolutely off the wall, has taken nearly all of my mental consciousness in order to kind of understand and adapt to. And I really did find that Si Spurrier wrote the Flash in the way I would have expected. I really didn't understand why Mike Deodato Jr. was the right pick for Si Spurrier, but this issue alleviates all my fears. The way that Mike Deodato draws these like insane page layouts that have like endless panels shows me that he is like the perfect fit over for Si Spurrier over in the comic book. Frankly, it's Si Spurrier, so you can expect to get a big, heady plot with some fascinating science fiction elements, but I think the aspect about this that makes this a little bit more kind of interesting to new readers is the fact that it's sort of coming from the relationship between Wally and Linda and stretches out of some of their relationship fears from there. I think the kind of hook and the way that this issue extends to kind of show what Si Spurrier is fully capable of over a kind of very kind of short amount of time is just wonderful here. And it really feels like the Flash book has no limits thanks to the artwork with Mike Deodato Jr. Who knows when we're going to get a panel in a weird place or a thought that's sort of a little bit dislocated. Frankly, and the last thing I want to go ahead and say about this story is I just absolutely love the way that Si Spurrier manages to capture some of the kind of internal narration over from Wally as a character. There's a lot of caption boxes over in this book, but I think, frankly, they add so much characterization over to this story. So at the end of the day here, I think The Flash issue 800 was a really phenomenal tale for the issue that featured so many fascinating stories and former creators of The Flash turning in such good work here. While I'm definitely sad to see Jeremy Adams and Fernando Pasarin kind of sunset their time on the title, I think author Si Spurrier and artist Mike Deodato Jr. did an excellent job contributing some fascinating work over to this Flash series. Well, I want to know from you, what are some of your thoughts over on this Flash comic book? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming to check out our video, and we'll be back really soon for more excellent DC Comics and Flash content. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.